Hello and welcome to the next tutorial in this series about creating an ident using Illustrator whilst working remotely. You may never have used Illustrator before, or you may have used it a little bit in year 9 or maybe year 10 or 11 even. If you haven't, I'm just going to give you a very quick introduction to Illustrator, what it is, why it's different from Photoshop, and why graphic designers use it almost universally around the world. Illustrator is what's called a vector drawing program. So when you create graphics in Illustrator, they are what's called vector graphics, and I'll show you very quickly what that means by drawing a circle. So if I go to the circle tool, which is in my shapes options here, by clicking and holding I can access the different types of shapes. You could do this as well at the same time if you're watching this video on your iPad and you've got the software open on a computer. Just go to the ellipse tool. I'm going to hold down Shift because I want a perfect circle, and I'm going to draw a circle that looks like that. Now, if this was Photoshop, of course I could draw a circle in Photoshop, and I was to zoom in, what we would see, and you can probably guess that circles in computer graphics are actually made out of square pixels. However, in Illustrator, if I zoom in on this circle, I can keep zooming in forever. In fact, I can go up to 6,400%, and you can see that the line remains sharp. That's because Illustrator is a vector drawing program which represents graphics using things called nodes, which are connected by lines. So if I click on this circle again and use this tool here, the direct selection tool, you can see that actually the circle consists of 4 anchor points. There's one there, one there, one there, and one there. And Illustrator is connecting these points with a curve. And what that means is that I can select one of these anchor points and change the shape of this circle like that into a kind of an egg shape, Control Z to undo. Or I can alter with these handles, I can alter the curve of the circle like that. And what this means for something like what we're doing is that any graphics that we create in Illustrator can be resized to any size without becoming pixelated. And so this is very useful for things like logos. It would be no good designing a logo in something like Photoshop, because as soon as you needed to increase the size of the logo, it would look very pixelated and blurred. And you've probably seen plenty of graphics in your time that looks pixelated and blurred, but Illustrator graphics always look clean and sharp. So the next thing to be aware of is that in Illustrator, graphics that we create are a combination of objects placed onto the artboard in a certain order. So if I just come back to my icons on the right here, I can open up this panel here, the layers panel, and with this little pull down box, it will show me all of the objects that are in the layer that I'm working in. I've only got one layer on my document at the moment. Any object in Illustrator, so for instance this circle that I just drew, has got 2 color parameters. It has down here a fill color and an outline color. So if I double click on the fill while this is selected and make this red, the circle will be red. And if I double click here on the stroke panel, I can choose a color to create a colored outline. So we now have a red circle with a green outline as shown here. If I copy and paste this circle, which is Command C, Command V, Control, sorry, I should remember Control C, Control V on a Windows PC. And I've got this circle, which I'm going to make blue. I'm going to take the outline off with this strike through. I'm going to do the same with this one. So I now have 2 circles in my document, one on top of the other. And if we look at the layers panel here, we can see those 2 objects, and we can see that the blue one is on top of the red one. If I was to take the blue and drag it underneath the red one, then I'd get something that looks like this. So the idea is that we build up objects on top of each other to create the graphic that we want. If I wanted to resize an object, I would go to my selection tool. This tool here is the one that we use quite a lot in Illustrator, or use the most actually in Illustrator. It's the one that we use to move or resize objects. So with the black arrow selected, the selection tool, I can click on an object, hold down Shift, which will maintain the proportions, in other words, keep it as a circle. Hold down Shift and I can drag the shape to be smaller. Click on this one and I can do the same. So I now have these two objects. If I want to move both of them, I can drag what's called a marquee around both of them like that. So they're both selected. We know that they're selected because they have a boundary box around the outside and they're highlighted in blue. And you can see here in the layers panel that this object has a blue dot next to it, meaning that it is selected. Just to briefly tell you about some other tools, there are lots of tools, and Illustrator is a deep piece of software. It's professional software. We won't need to understand its functionality entirely to be able to do this task, but I'll just tell you about some things that you can do with the software that are very simple. The first thing is that we can, just like we would on any other drawing program that you may have used in the past, we can draw lines freehand. It's nice in Illustrator because it will kind of correct curves to make them smoother. And again, if I was to zoom in using the magnifying glass on this curve, you can see that it's not pixelated. It remains sharp at any magnification or any size. Control and 0 to go back to this magnification. The pen tool can be used to make shapes by connecting points, so I'm just clicking randomly and it will join the lines up, and then when I get back to the original point I'll get a little outline dot next to the pen, and if I click there, that has now created an object. And again, if I wanted this object to be a color, I would just click down here in the fill, and then I can either choose a color or I could double click on the fill to get more control. This is a pink object with a blue outline as shown here. The pen tool can also be used to create curves, so instead of just clicking to create a shape, I can click and then drag to create curves like that. That's called a Bezier tool, and then round back to the start. So we can create complex curved objects like that. We also have different strokes available. So if I go to my pencil tool and draw a line or draw a curve like that, I can, once I've drawn that line, I will have options up here. This part of the screen is called a context sensitive menu. In other words, it will bring up options based on the thing that you've selected. So because I've selected a line, it's giving me the option automatically to change the what's called the weight or the stroke of the line, so the line can be thicker like that. I can choose different profiles for the line, so I can have the line so it tapers to a point if I want to. With the line selected, I can change to other profiles if I want to do that. I've also got the option to go into different brushes and pencils, so I can do something that looks a bit more organic and realistic like that. And there are actually lots of options down here in this menu. We can do arrows, we can do ink, paint, tons of different options there to create nice looking lines. If I want to remove an object that I've created, I just need to click on it and press the backspace key. If I want to group objects together, which is often very useful, I just need to draw a marquee with the selection tool that selects both of them, and then Control and G, and that has now formed a group. So these two are kind of stuck together. We can ungroup them as well. So the first thing I would recommend that you do is just have a play with the tools down the left-hand side, and it should be fairly intuitive working out what things do for the basics. Of course, we're designing an ident, so the next thing that we're going to be looking at is type, because we have to use typography for our ident. So the next video will be all about, or the first of a series of videos, all about creating interesting and attractive text using Illustrator.